I welcome you all to the module 11, that is about developing positive personality traits. So, this is the second lecture of this module and overall it is lecture number 25. So, today we will be talking about another positive personality trait, which is resilient personality. So, before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture. So, last lecture was the first lecture basically, that is lecture number 24. This was the first lecture of this module and we introduced the idea of positive personality traits, and in that context we discussed character strengths. So, we discussed what is the meaning of character strengths and what is the benefit of studying character strengths or strengths, psychological strengths. We discussed more specifically or in detail about the VIA classification of strengths and virtues proposed by Peterson and Seligman. We also discussed how character strengths are associated with happiness and well-being, different research findings we discussed, and at the end we discussed how to cultivate character strengths or what are the ways by which we can enhance certain character strengths in our life. So, today's lecture we will be talking about the concept of resilient personality. So, we will be talking about what is the meaning of resilient personality, we will be talking about characteristics of resilient personality, and at the end we will be talking about what are the clinical implications of understanding a resilient personality. So, let us start. So, let us start with the concept of resilience. What is resilience? So, the resilience is a very important concept in the field of clinical psychology, in the field of positive psychology and so on, because it is very closely connected to the concept of well-being and facing difficulties of life and so on. So, there are many definitions to the concept of resilience. So, we will be talking about some of these formal definitions. So, one of the definition of resilience is that it is a dynamic. One of the definitions of resilience is that it is a dynamic process encompassing positive adaptation within the context of significant adversity. Resilience is characterized by good outcomes in spite of serious threats to adaptation or development. So, what is the gist of this definition is basically that resilience is mostly defined in the context of when certain adversities or certain traumatic situation happens in one's life, or certain obstacles or challenging situation happens in one's lives, how people positively adapt to those challenges or difficulties in life, how quickly they are able to bounce back from the adversities and the problems of life and bounce back and function properly in their life. So, that is the concept of resilience. So, in that context, resilience, the definition has two important aspects. One is the exposure to significant threat or adversity. So, resilience is always defined in the context of exposure to certain adversities in life. So, there will be some traumatic situation, there will be some challenging situation, there will be some adversity in life. Resilience is always defined in that context. So, there has to be some kind of adversity or challenges in one's life. This is one important aspect. Second important aspect is then how do you positively adapt to that challenges of life or adversities of life. How quickly you are able to adapt. So, these are the two important aspects of basically achievement of positive adaptation despite threats and the encounter of threat. So, these are the two important aspects that define the resilience. The more quickly one is able to bounce back from the adversities or the problems of life or adapt more quickly, the better resilience they have. So, the concept of resilience, the more resilience is defined in the context of how easily or how quickly one is able to bounce back or able to positively adapt to challenges or difficulties of one's life. So, that is the concept of resilience. Now, some researchers distinguish between should we consider resilience as a trait or just resilient as a process. So, there are both aspects. There are researchers who look into resilience from both the aspects. So, both the aspects are true in the sense of resilience. So, sometimes resilience could be a trait like characteristics that some people have a trait of resilience. So, it is almost like an inbuilt personality trait, they are able to quickly bounce back. But some people look at it as more of a process, what are the different contextual factor that that contributes to the resilience. So, resilience could be kind of looked at from both the perspective. It could be as a trait or it could be as a process depending on how you look at it. Now, since this is a course on personality psychology, we will be mostly focusing here more specifically we will focus on the trait like resilience or the resilience as a trait, as a personality trait. So, here we will be focusing more on the perspective of personality trait like concept of resilience. So, there are a lot of literature available on the process of resilience and we will be not focusing much on that part. So, resilient personality is mostly defined by trait like qualities that demonstrate a strong, well organized and integrated sense of self, along with the characteristics that fosters meaningful reciprocal relationship with others. So, there are certain characteristics or traits, if they are present within an individual, that makes the person highly resilient. So, our kind of investigation here in this lecture will be mostly will focus from that perspective only. So, these traits collectively contribute to high levels of adaptability and effective functioning, because the concept of resilience is mostly used in the context of adaptation, context of effective functionings. So, many researcher says resilient personality is mostly like opposite of personality disorders or psychological disorders. So, if you have high resilience, that means you will be more away from psychological disorders. Less resilience leads to more psychological disorders. So, it is more like two end of a spectrum. So, resilient personalities can be seen as the opposite of personality disorders, which are characterized by, if you look at lot of the psychological disorders are characterized by very rigid maladaptive patterns of perceiving, thinking and relating. So, these disorders involve deficits in self concept and impaired capacity for forming healthy interpersonal relationship. If you see all these common characteristics of psychological disorders, this all reflects lack of resilience, or these are just opposite of what makes a person resilient. So, in that sense, some researchers argue that the concept of resilient personality is opposite of psychological disorders. A lot of these ideas that we will be discussing in this particular lecture, which talks about sources of personality strength, a lot of this research actually is coming from the Western cultural perspective. Obviously, a lot of it is also applicable universally, but some of this concept could be mostly connected to the concept of Western culture, but we will be also talking about the relationship perspective, which is also very prevalent in collectivist culture also. So, a lot of research actually because happened in the Western culture. So, they may have certain taste or kind of flavor of those Western cultural aspects. So, let us see what are the characteristics of resilient personality. So, we will be looking at some of the important characteristics. If someone has a resilient personality, what are the qualities they have, what are the traits or characteristics they have. So, Skudal, a researcher in 2010, he listed some of the traits of resilient personality, and we will be discussing some of these traits. So, if you see broadly all the traits, two major aspects are there in the resilient personality. One is a strong sense of self. So, there is something within themselves, there is a strong sense of self. All resilient personalities have a very strong sense of self. What does that mean? We will be talking about now. And another aspect is they have kind of very good interpersonal skills, relating with other people, they have a very good interpersonal skills. So, in the context of strong sense of self, it basically means the resilient personalities have high self esteem, self confidence or self efficacy, higher self understanding, positive future orientation or optimism, and ability to manage negative emotions and behaviors. So, these are some of the things that makes a strong sense of self. That means, some of the traits or characteristics within the person which gives a very strength in their personality, that makes them a resilient personality. So, we will be talking about some of these things in more detail. So, this is one important aspect of resilient personality. Another is about their interpersonal skills are very important. So, resilient personalities not only possess individual traits like optimism, emotional regulation and adaptability, they also exhibit very strong interpersonal skills that enhance their ability to build and maintain supportive relationships. This relationship play a crucial role in helping individuals cope with the stressful situation. So, they have generally have a better interpersonal skills, which makes them a better social support network, and this helps them during the time of adversity or crisis. If you have more support system, you are more likely to easily face and bounce back from difficulties of life, because other people will support you. So, these are two broad important characteristics of resilient personality. Now, let us see each of these aspects in more detail. So, in the context of strong sense of self, we have seen one of the important aspect is they have higher sense of self efficacy or self confidence. So, a resilient personality is marked by a strong belief in one's ability to handle life challenges effectively, with self confidence and self efficacy being fundamental to resilience. So, your ability to handle, so what is your belief system? If you all the time believe that you will not be able to help, you will not be able to handle a situation. So, that belief system automatically will make you less resilient, and you will likely to avoid situations and run away from situations. So, this what is the internal belief, and that gives you a sense of self confidence, that you are more likely to your sense of self confidence about your own ability to handle situation and challenges of life is something very important in the concept of resilience. Now, this ability or sense of self efficacy may develop slowly as one faces different aspects of life. It may not suddenly develop, it may develop as one face more and more challenges, and they get successes in handling them. Slowly they develop this self confidence in their ability to handle situations, and that sense of ability gives them a sense of resilience, and they will be able to much better way able to function and adapt in a better way. So, resilient individual also have in that context of adaptation or self confidence, they have something called as an internal locus of control, which we have also discussed in detail in the earlier lectures, which means they believe in their own actions rather than external factor like fate or luck largely influence their events. So, when you think that you are the agent or you are the cause, or you can make certain changes outside, you are more likely to put efforts and try to handle the situation and try your best to bring out changes. So, that is called internal locus of control. On the other hand, people who are externally locus of control, they always believe in fate and luck, and they become much more passive in terms of not taking initiative and other things. So, this internal locus of control is something that also makes people more resilient, gives them more self confidence and self efficacy. So, these beliefs fosters more effective problem solving, coping strategies, enabling them to face difficulties with optimism and so that these are the important qualities that makes them or help them to adapt and cope with the difficult situations or stressful situations and make them more resilient. So, this is one important aspect of strong sense of self. Resilience also in terms of this big 5 factors trait that we discussed is negatively associated with traits like neuroticism. So, neuroticism trait makes people less resilient because they are emotionally more kind of unstable. So, they get more easily disturbed or irritated by the problems of life. So, neuroticism as a trait makes people less resilient, which is mostly very strongly connected with the negative emotions, experience of negative emotions and so on. And people with neuroticism trait, they view the world as more threatening or more threatful place, which makes them more vulnerable and less resilient. In contrast, resilience is positively linked with extroversions and positive emotions or positive emotionality, which reflects a tendency to confront challenges with confidence and positivity. So, people who are more extrovert and have more positive emotions, they are more likely automatically they will have the sense of resilience will will be much higher as compared to people who are neuroticism and have more negative emotions in terms of experiences. So, this is more about its connection with the certain personality traits. Another important aspects of resilient personality is that they have better self understanding. So, which basically means they possess insights into their motivations, emotions, strengths and weaknesses. So, more you understand your inner dynamics, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, more self awareness if you have, that gives you better self understanding. So, it gives you a sense of personal identity. It allows you to perceive yourself as a coherent individual with a clear sense of meaning and purpose. So, self understanding is very important. Otherwise, people without self understanding, they will be propelled by the external stimulus, because they will not have any self understanding. whatever happens in the outside world, they will be more like attracted and influenced by those even more. If you have more self understanding, you will know what is my preferences, what are the directions I should take. People will have more of judgment about those aspects, and they will more likely to take better decisions in terms of right things in the situations. So, development of this personal identity is essential task of adult development, and which may lead to better resilience and so on. So, this accurate self awareness and monitoring of one's emotion is very important aspect of concept of social intelligence, emotional intelligence. So, these are some of the concepts which are very important in terms of increasing the quality of life and success in life. Self awareness is very important in all these concepts, including resilience also. So, this emotional awareness helps resilient individuals manage their emotions effectively and maintain strong interpersonal relationships. So, more you have self awareness, more you will be able to understand yourself better. In that way, you will be able to better way to relate with other people and maintain strong interpersonal relationships, which are also important component of resilience. Also, resilience often involves a strong spiritual dimension. It may involve in certain cases, not necessarily in every cases, where individuals view themselves with the context of larger world, contributing to their motivation and excitement of self discovery. So, something beyond their own personal existence, which may in transcendental dimensions of spirituality and so on. So, this process of self exploration plays very important role in the continuous growth and the development of resilient personality. So, this is another important aspect. Self understanding, self exploration, self awareness also contributes to the resilient personality. Another important characteristics related to the concept of self is positive future orientations. What's your orientation towards the future? How do you look at your future? That plays very important role in the sense of resilience. So, resilient individuals are mostly future oriented and motivated to achieve success across various aspects of life. So, they have generally a better positive orientation about the future, and they pursue their goals to achieve a better future. So, you have a vision for your future that will propel your present life and kind of give you in the right directions and face difficulties and get success. So, that vision is very important. If somebody does not have any vision for the future, obviously they will not get the courage to face difficulties and go there. So, they tend to be goal driven, industrious and productive, showing determination and persistence in pursuing the personal objectives. Because of the positive future orientation, it automatically gives you more energy, industriousness, productivity, because your future vision will direct all this energy in that direction. Although typically optimistic about the outcomes of their endeavors, resilient people are also flexible and adapt with the changing circumstances and setbacks. Now, that positive orientation does not mean you have an unrealistic expectation about everything will go in the positive direction. It basically means you have a vision which is positive and you work towards it, but if something changes, there are setback comes, you are also flexible to change your plan and kind of from plan A to plan B, and that flexibility of mental flexibility is very important for resilience. So, that is something also most of the resilient personality shows that characteristics. So, they handle limitations and challenges with composure, demonstrating emotional resilience and ability to accept setbacks. So, ability to accept setbacks, failures, flexibility in terms of changing perspectives, all these are very important. Only having positive vision does not make someone resilient. How you deal with the problems and setbacks, that is what is more important in the concept of resilience. Control of another important aspects related to the self is the control of negative behaviors and emotions. If one is not able to manage their emotions, if some problem happens, some failure happens, automatically negative emotions will come. One will feel dejected, depressed, sad and so on. These emotions are natural outcomes of failures and problems and obstacles in one's life. But then how do you handle those emotions? How are you able to manage those emotions? That will determine your resilience, because these emotions, we all experience those emotions, but how are you able to manage them? If you are not able to manage them, you will not be able to bounce back and go on with the functioning in your day to day functionings. So, that is very important role. So, how do you control your emotion or impulses? So, that is very important aspects, your ability to deal with emotions or coping with the emotions, you know. So, that is also a very important part of concept of emotional intelligence, that is very important for resilience also. So, in addition to these self disciplines, resilient people experience and appreciate positive emotions, often having well deserved sense of humor and overall sense of well being. So, this positive emotions plays very important role in resilience, because the moment we experience more and more negative emotions, we generally, their whole mental perspective changes and we tend to see in the negative directions only, and we see more failures and darkness, because the emotion directs our thought processes. On the other hand, positive emotions broadens our perspectives and it gives us more hope and instill hope for the future and gives us energy to face problems of life. So, obviously, there will be negative emotions when problem happens, but then to what is the ratio of positive and negative emotion that one experiences plays very important role. If we experience too much of negative emotions, the resilience is less likely to happen, but in comparison to negative emotions, if we have more positive emotions, then it will make us more resilient. Subjective well-being, happiness, a lot of these things are associated with low level of neuroticism. So, neuroticism, as we have already seen, is negatively related to resilience, and high level of extroversions along with self-efficacy, autonomy, and these are important characteristics which promotes resilience. So, these traits help them maintain a positive outlooks and cope effectively with the stress and adversity. Another important characteristics related to the concept of self is called hardiness. Psychological hardiness, which basically means certain characteristics makes people mentally tough. What are those characteristics? So, hardiness is basically that construct that consists of, that looks at that psychological sense of strength that one develops. So, according to this concept, the psychological hardiness comes from three important aspects. One is the sense of control in one's life. So, which basically means it is a person's tendency to believe they can influence the event in their life rather than feeling helpless in the face of external forces. So if you believe that you can control things, whatever that is controllable, obviously we cannot control everything in life, lot of things are beyond our control, but even if we kind of give up in for things which we can control, then we kind of become helpless, that we cannot do anything. That makes people less psychologically tough or less resilient. Sense of control is something that gives you a sense of psychological strength, which is a part of hardiness, sense of hardiness. So, it is a belief about to what extent that you can influence the events in your life. If you have more stronger belief about that, then you will try to take initiative and try to change things, whatever is under one's control. So, individuals high in control view themselves as agent of their own outcomes. So, they believe that they have to put efforts to make changes in their life. So, that is something very important. One is sense of control, that gives sense of hardiness. Another is sense of commitment, which basically reflects a sense of engagement and purpose in life. So, if you commit to something, that means you will engage with that despite whatever the problem happens. So, if you have committed to something, despite adversities and challenges, you will keep working in that direction. So, that is commitment. So, rather than feeling alienated, individuals with high commitment actively participate in life activities and derive meaning from their experiences. So, sense of whatever challenge comes in one's life, that sense of engagement and to complete whatever is their task, that is the sense of commitment. The last one is sense of challenge, which basically means people with this trait see change as a natural part of life and view it as an opportunity for growth rather than threat for security. So, if any problem happens or anything that comes in one's life, changes happens in everybody's life, this is a natural aspect of everyone's life. So, people with a sense of challenge, they view change as a natural thing, they accept it, they do not resist those changes and they try to see opportunities in that change, that every change will also bring certain opportunities. One way is to take these changes and do whatever is needed to keep your life in certain direction, or you just feel victimized about the situations, then you are not having sense of challenge. You will be always feeling threat and about the security and so on. So, this is about sense of challenge. It is an approach towards life that you see changes are natural part of life, and you see opportunities in changes and try to make best use of those changes. So, that is the sense of challenge. So, the sense of control, sense of commitment, sense of challenge, these three quality makes people psychologically tough or stronger, and ultimately it is an important aspect of sense of resilience also. So, resilient personalities are generally have score higher on the hardiness. So, that means higher on these three traits. Another important aspect is called ego resilience, which is also connected to the resilient personality. So, it is basically talks about personality trait that enable individuals to adapt flexibly and resourcefully to life stressors. So, it is a trait that talks about individuals, that gives an ability to individuals to adapt flexibly. So, that flexibility is very important. How do you adapt to life situation in a flexible way? Whatever situation happens, accordingly you adapt. That sense of flexibility and resourcefully adaptation to certain situation, that gives you a sense of ego resilience. So, this trait is also very important in the context of resilient personality. So, in the context of ego resilience has many characteristics that makes people ego resilient, and so some of these things include like optimism, positive outlooks and beliefs in own ability, productive activity, tendency to engage in goal directed and effective behaviors, insight and warmth, the combination of emotional intelligence and the ability to maintain healthy warm relationships, skilled expressiveness, ability to communicate thoughts and emotions effectively, demonstrating adaptability in social interactions. These are some of the characteristics that are associated with ego resilience, and all these are like also contribute to the sense of resilient personality. So, these are all important aspects of strengths of self, one important cluster of characteristics of resilient personality. Another cluster that we talked about, that the resilient personalities have better interpersonal skills. Now, let us see what are the things that comes under interpersonal skills. So, one important aspect of interpersonal skills is sociability. Sociability basically means resilient individuals are more naturally sociable, gregarious and extroverted than average. So, generally they have a more tendency towards connection with other people. They are more social in that sense. They are more gregarious and extroverted generally, most of them. So, that is another important aspect that helps them to get better social support and so on. They tend to be gracious, cordial, affable and genial, which makes it easier for them to meet new people, form friendships and enjoy companions. As a result, they usually have an extended social network that they can rely on during challenging times. The idea is that during challenging times, if you have a better social networks, which need not be like very large network or something like that, but most of a meaningful network where you can rely on certain people. That more meaningful relationship with certain people is very important in terms of dealing with difficult times. So, sociability as a quality kind of makes people more likely to have social support network because of that characteristics. So, resilient people score high on also agreeableness, another trait of big 5 factor of the 5 factor model, which reflects their tendency to be cooperative, compassionate and kind in social interactions. So, these are the qualities related to agreeableness, which basically tendency to be cooperative with other people, compassionate, understanding others feelings and perspectives of life, kind in social interaction. All this also actually increases the chances of better relationship with other people and social network, more meaningful social networks, which are important for the resilient personality. So, they also possess strong interpersonal communication skills. So, this is also important in communicating with other people, communication skills which enables them to build and maintain relationships that are supportive and positive. So, during stressful periods, resilient individuals are able to access social support, which is very important part of resilience, while maintaining a capacity for self reliance. They also have a very strong, very interesting combination of self reliance and social support, because you cannot rely only on yourself in all the situations. You need to take support from other people. So, that maintaining balance, where you can do, you do, where you need support, you also are able to get support from other people. So, that is something as one of the important aspects of resilience. So, that sense of balance is very important in the coping with the adversity. Another aspects of interpersonal relationship is emotional expressiveness, ability to appropriately express emotions to others, which plays very crucial roles in fostering strong interpersonal relationship, which are invaluable during the time of stress. How are you able to kind of communicate your emotions and expressing emotions? So, resilient individuals are adept in openly conveying warmth and sharing their feelings, creating deep emotional bonds. Trusting others is something very important to know. This sense of emotional expressiveness also kind of helps them to make more stronger relationship with other or bonding with other people. This openness in communication allows emotional support to flow more freely, helping making connections, making it easier for resilient individual to tap in the support network. So, by sharing emotions in a healthy way, resilient people strengthen their relationships and enhance their coping mechanisms through trust and mutual understanding. So, this also contributes to interpersonal relationship. Another important obviously is in the context of interpersonal relationship is understanding the interpersonal context and empathy. So, empathy is basically it's an ability to perceive and understand feelings of other people or the perspective of other people, how other people are viewing the world, to what extent you can understand others' perspective of life. Then one can connect with other people and one can kind of relate with other people. If you only look at world only from through your understanding or your perspective of life, and you kind of ignore how other people is looking at it, you cannot make connection with people. For making connection, you have to kind of understand others' perspective and be kind of empathy. That is the whole idea of empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of other people. So, that ability is very important in the interpersonal context and constant context of resilience also. So, this empathic quality allows people to connect with others on a deep emotional level and communicate their understanding effectively. Their empathy is often accompanied by unselfishness and altruism, as they show genuine concern for the well-being of others. So, the idea is, so this is another important aspects in terms of making interpersonal relationship better and positive, which enhances, contributes to our sense of resilience and facing difficulties in one's life. So, the idea is this all these characteristics that we discussed, they promotes kind of sense of reciprocal social support. So, the more you understand other people, the other people are also more likely to reciprocate those gestures and support. So, it is a kind of in that sense it is very important. So, these are some of the characteristics of resilient personality. So, there are certain aspects within their personality which contributes to their sense of resilience, and there are certain aspects about the relationship with other people which makes their social network better, more meaningful, and they can derive support during the time of difficulties. So, they are able to bounce back much easier way. So, these are some of the important aspects of resilience as a kind of different characteristics of resilience. Now, a lot of research shows resilience act as a or resilient personality act as a protective factor in the different situations of life, different vulnerable situations of life where people can go into disorder stage, people can kind of break down and so on. So, if you have a resilient characteristics, you are more likely to protect this, act as a protective factor, it will protect your kind of mental health. So, a lot of studies indicates those in those directions. So, the findings from children in the community study, some of the community study shows the significant protective role of resilient personality trait in youth development, especially in the context of youths. If they have a resilient personality, it can protect them from many negative outcomes of one's life. So, this study suggests that traits like confidence, optimism, insight, warmth, productive ability, social interactional skills at the age of 16 are linked to decreased likelihood of various adverse outcomes by age of 22. So, if you have a resilient personality, developmentally also it acts as a protective factor, and you are more likely to be protected from negative outcomes in life, which includes lower risk of developing psychiatric disorders, attempting suicide, engaging in violent and criminal behavior, facing interpersonal difficulties, and experiencing educational occupational problems. So, you are less likely to face all these problems if you have a resilient personality. This is some of the research at least indicates in the youth, in the stage of youth, or in a sample of youths. This study also highlight the concept of ego resilience that we discussed earlier, where high levels of this trait can act as a protective buffer against psychological disorders, even when individuals encounter multiple negative life events. This sense of resilient trait protect them from all negative impacts of life or going into the disordered stage. In another study, in the collaborative longitudinal personality disorder study in 2007, positive achievement and interpersonal experiences during childhood and adolescence were found to significantly contribute to the decrease of avoidant personality disorder and schizotypal personality disorder. So, certain characteristics, if you see interpersonal experiences which are connected to the resilient personality, they decrease the likelihood of certain psychological disorder like avoidant personality disorder. It is a kind of disorder in personality. We will not go into the details of this, it is just certain psychological disorder in the personality of person. Schizotypal personality disorder over a 4-year period. So, it protects this particular trait or resilient trait protects people from some of these psychological disorder, including personality disorders. So, achievement, motivation and social skills competency are often mentioned aspects of resilience and positive youth development. So, these are the traits that actually protected people from these personality disorders. So, positive childhood experiences in the achievement and relationship domains predicted remission from these disorders, avoidant personality disorders and this schizotypal personality disorder, even in the presence of physical, sexual and verbal abuse and neglect. So, the basic idea is certain traits associated with resilient personality protects people from psychological disorders. So, what are the clinical implications of these findings? As we have already seen, some of the researcher thinks resilient personality is opposite of psychological disorder. So, if you have developed certain resilience characteristics of resilient personality, you are less likely to or less vulnerable, you will become less vulnerable for psychological disorders. So, there will be obviously it has a very important clinical implications, particularly in the context of disorders and other things, which says basically resilient personality trait have a significant implication for both treatment and preventing mental disorders. Early intervention that focus on fostering personal strengths, competencies and interpersonal skills have shown to be beneficial, particularly for young patients. So, especially in the earlier stages of life, if we make certain intervention for enhancing this trait of resilience or certain competencies related to resilience, this is found to be very beneficial for young patients and they are kind of in protecting them from the psychological disorders. So, by promoting resilience early on in the life of a person, individuals are better equipped to manage stress and challenges in the later part of their life or the remaining part of their life. So, research indicates that an increases in the resilience is associated with greater improvement in various clinical settings, including primary care outpatients, general psychiatric outpatients, patient undergoing treatment for conditions such as generalized anxiety disorder, post traumatic stress disorder. So, these are name of few psychological disorder. The idea is the resilience or any intervention that increases or promotes resilience in the personality of a person. These are all found to protect people from all kinds of psychological disorders. So, this stress or research also shows any intervention program related to stress management program that focuses on enhancing resilience, any intervention shown to improve emotional well-being of patients with cancers, reducing depression and helping them to stay engaged in their life activities. So, these are like promoting resilience also promotes many positive outcomes and reduces negative outcomes in terms of psychological characteristics. So, by targeting resilience through therapeutic interventions, mental health professional can significantly enhance patient outcomes, offering protective factor against present and future psychological distress. So in that sense it has a very important clinical implications, and any therapies or any therapies that are designed to kind of enhance or promote resilience can protect people from all kinds of psychological disorders. So these are some of the things about resilient personality traits and their implications in the life, in our life. So with this I stop here. Thank you.